This stork looks exhausted. It's carrying 10 babies and looks like it's about to fall from the sky. Just like the stork that's having a hard time carrying all the babies, ecosystems have a hard time supporting large populations, simply because it doesn't have enough resources. These resources could be a variety of things, biotic or abiotic. Plants on the bottom of the rainforest floor have a really difficult time getting light, so they have many types of adaptations to help them overcome this challenge. Predators need to have prey to eat, as well as mates and space to raise their young. All of these challenges mean that an ecosystem will only be able to support a specific number of individuals of a certain species, or their carrying capacity. In this lecture, we'll be looking at some of the factors that limit populations and determine the carrying capacity. A limiting factor is anything that controls the growth of a population. It's these limiting factors that determine the carrying capacity of a particular species in an ecosystem. The more limiting factors present, the lower the carrying capacity tends to be. It's sort of like this overflowing barrel of water. The barrel can only hold so much water. This is like the carrying capacity. The population will continue to grow until the barrel is filled up or the carrying capacity is reached. Two things can lead to a species reaching their carrying capacity in an ecosystem: the decreased birth rate or an increased death rate. An increased death rate is usually more obvious and easier to observe. The overflowing water represents individuals that die because the ecosystem can't support them. They might die for a variety of reasons. They might be outcompeted for resources, preyed upon by another animal, or catch a disease. These are all biotic factors that affect the carrying capacity. But there are also abiotic factors that affect it as well. Crops that farmers grow can be limited by the nutrients in the soil. This is why farmers put down fertilizer. By increasing the carrying capacity, they increase their yield and are able to sell more of their product. Natural disasters like tornadoes, floods, and earthquakes decrease the population as well. Usually, unusual weather is a little like natural disasters, but not so noticeable. Human activity can also affect how large a population is able to get. Campaigns to have pets spayed and neutered controls the pet population, since domesticated cats and dogs don't generally have any predators. All of these limiting factors that contribute to a decrease in population size can be put into two groups: density-dependent limiting factors and density-independent limiting factors. And the key difference between them is whether population density plays a role or not. When there are a lot of individuals in a small area, resources they need to survive become scarce. This results in competition for resources. Animals that compete with each other might physically fight for resources, like these ants. They seem so small and harmless, but look at these ants, they're vicious. Besides fights killing members of a species, if an organism is competing for food and doesn't get enough, they could die of starvation. For plants, one of these resources could include light. Lastly, when a population becomes very large, the competition for mates is more intense. Imagine how much a high school boy would have to compete for dating a pretty lady if there was only one girl who went to his school. Those boys might start doing some crazy things to get her attention. And male animals in the wild are no different. Most of the time, the pretty individuals of a species are male. There are a lot of birds with pretty elaborate feather displays, like peacocks. Predation and herbivory also limit how large a population can get. In fact, you can see in the graph what happens to the predator and prey populations. When there is a lot of prey in a community, the population of predators is able to grow very large. However, there comes a point when there are so many predators that the population of prey begins to decrease. When the prey decreases and the predators don't have enough to eat, then they starve and die. Without many predators, the prey is able to rebuild their ranks, and the cycle continues. Parasitism and disease are also density-dependent limiting factors because the larger a population it is, the easier it is for disease to spread, and the more hosts that are available to parasites. We've said before that parasites aren't interested in killing their hosts, so then how can they limit the size of their population? So malaria is caused by a parasite carried by mosquitoes, usually in Africa or in the Mediterranean. When mosquitoes bite their host, it transmits malaria larvae that grow inside the human. These larvae can then be picked up by other mosquitoes. It is an advantage to the malaria parasite if you lay very still and don't have the energy to swat mosquitoes, because then more mosquitoes can bite you and take the malaria parasite to new hosts. And if you don't have the energy to swat mosquitoes, you probably also don't have the energy to reproduce. The picture below gives you an idea about the life cycle of the malaria parasite. The only thing it doesn't show well is the humans. Malaria makes you very sick. I guess the man in the picture is green. Stress due to overcrowding can also limit the size of a population. It does this in two ways. When the population density is higher, more fights tend to break out. It even happens in humans. Look at how crowded inner cities are compared with suburbs and rural areas, and how much more crime you're likely to find in inner cities. Stress can also make the immune system weak, which leaves an individual more open to disease. Sometimes limiting factors affect a population regardless of their size. These are density-independent limiting factors. Regardless of how large or small a population is, if weather is unusual, individuals might die or might not reproduce as quickly as they used to. If the first frost of winter comes early, everything in my garden will die. The squirrels that might eat my tomatoes will have less time to eat the seeds and poop them out somewhere else, and there will be fewer tomatoes to eat. An early frost wouldn't really be considered a natural disaster, but it is unusual. Humans also have a big effect on how large populations can become, and most of the time we don't care how big the population is to start out with. Farmers who spray their crops with herbicides to kill the weeds will spray even if there's a few weeds or if there's a lot. They may feel more motivated to spray if there's more weeds, but just because there are more weeds doesn't mean a larger population or a larger portion of them are going to die. The same goes for humans spaying or neutering their pets. These methods of population control don't work any better or any worse if the population of pets is larger or smaller. So to sum up, there are two different types of factors that cause populations to reach their carrying capacities: density-dependent and density-independent. Density-dependent limiting factors have a large effect on large populations and smaller effects on smaller populations. Density-independent limiting factors have the same effect regardless of the size of the population.